Yeah. Okay. Next slide. Again, I said use the chat and please stay on mute. Okay. We're Restore Justice. Those of you who are not familiar with us, we work on state level policy reforms that impact people serving extreme prison sentences and their families, with an emphasis on youth and emerging adults. My name's Julie. I'm the outreach director. My own son, Eric, was incarcerated 27 and a half years. He went in 1995 as a 15-year-old, was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. 2012, Miller came about and he was released 2007, 2023. So it took a little while to get that court decision applied. It was, really wonderful because we thought he was going to die in prison for a long, long time. And as I said, and again, those of you who have people inside know that you pick up these wonderful people that are abandoned by their families pretty much, or maybe they've outlived their family or something, and you wind up getting very attached to them. Okay, and now, Alan. I'm so excited to have Alan Mills here. He's nationally recognized prisoner rights advocate, and he's devoted decades to representing incarcerated individuals. Um, Prior to joining Kaplan and Grady, he was the executive director at Uptown People's Law Center, having previously served as its legal director and a staff attorney. During his tenure, Allen developed the organization's prisoner rights practice into the largest docket of prisoner civil rights cases in Illinois. I had many times gone down to Menard and seen Alan in line to visit in the DOC. His work is groundbreaking. He's challenged the Federal Prison Litigation Reform Act, and he's done individual cases involving excessive force, censorship, religious diet refusals, and due process violations. He has served as class counsel in dozens of class actions on behalf of prisoners, challenging parole, revocation procedures, prison conditions, accommodations for deaf and hard of hearing, and adequacy of mental health and medical care. And I can honestly say that Alan definitely probably isn't the most loved attorney by the DOC. And again, these kind of things are really challenging when you try to kind of get information from the DOC. They can put up some roadblocks. They tend to ignore FOIAs pretty regularly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of difficult. We have a few of our staff members here, and I'll just ask them. Lizzie, maybe say hi real quick. And
For sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Lizzie Lewandowski. I am the communications manager at Restore Justice, which means that you're getting a lot of emails from me. Thank you for being here with us, and we hope this is helpful, if not a fun evening.
Okay, and we have Tammy.
Gonna be fun.
Hi,
Yeah.
everyone. I am Tamala Crowder. I am the development manager here at Restore Justice. I'm really happy to be here with you all, and hopefully we can learn something that'll be helpful for us. So good to see you all.
And James.
Don't ever sit down in football practice.
Good evening, everybody. I'm James Swansea. I'm the policy director here at Restore Justice, and I'm here in support. This definitely is a tough issue. I spent 28 years in the Department of Corrections, so I've seen what it is that Julie talks about, in the aspect of individuals not having the proper, I guess you could say, process when individuals do pass away. So.
And I see Sophie on.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophie. I am a summer intern here at Restore Justice. I'm very happy and excited to learn more about this process as well. I've heard a lot from Julie. And so yeah, happy to be here.
And with that, we'll pull our slide off. So Alan is like, okay, there's not two of me. And I will let Alan take over. I'm so happy.
Yeah, you never want to say this is a happy occasion, but I'm glad to
Right.
be here to address this very difficult topic. Um, you kind of glanced over the part of what I'm doing now at Kaplan and Grady. This is a private law firm, but just like I've been suing the Department of Corrections since unbelievably 1980, I continue to sue the Department of Corrections, and a large part of our practice here at Kaplan and Grady is in fact wrongful death cases on behalf of people who were incarcerated when they at the time that they die, both in Illinois as well as nationwide. We have cases all over the country now, including I don't know. I don't know if everybody saw, but hopefully you saw, at least some of you saw the uh, very difficult Marshall Project report this week or last week on the fires at Joliet Correctional Center, or Joliet Treatment Center, I should say. I'm old, like there was a Joliet Correctional Center when I started doing this work, but now it's Joliet Treatment Center. And that article really focused on a client of ours here at Kaplan and Grady, Jason Steffens, who in many ways exemplifies exactly what's wrong with the system. And so I'm going to spend a minute talking about his individual case, and then I'll talk more broadly about the issues you're here for. But Jason he had both a mental illness as well as sickle cell anemia. He'd been treated for sickle cell since he was about 5 years old. One of the aspects of sickle cell is that periodically you have severe episodes of pain. And it's very difficult to treat, particularly in the Department of Corrections, where they are loath to give anybody strong painkillers or narcotics. His pain was bad enough that they actually did make an exception and give him some narcotics in order to reduce that pain. But one of the best ways to relieve those pains is through blood transfusions, periodic transfusions, and that they did not give him. So partly as a result of his mental illness, he decided that one of the ways he would try to force them to give him medical care was to hurt himself. So he did some self-harm, got sent out to the local hospital. The doctors at the local hospital said, well, we can't do those transfusions we need. You need to go to University of Illinois for that. And in fact, the prison doctors also said, you need these transfusions, but they can't do it at the local hospital. And we have to wait for the proper approvals to send you out to University of Illinois at Chicago to do those transfusions. And that went on for months and months and months and months. And meanwhile, he's going through severe pain. So he tells prison officials, I'm going to continue to hurt myself until you get me medical care. It seems to be the only thing that works. It's the only way I get to a hospital is when I hurt myself. And I'm going to keep hurting myself more and more until you send me to a hospital that actually can do these transfusions. So he cut himself, he swallowed glass, swallowed some other things in order to get to a hospital that kept taking him to the local hospital, which would not treat him. And ultimately, for whatever reason, and of course we don't actually know the reason, but ultimately he did set fire in his cell. And that's where things got even worse. So lack of medical care, lack of mental health care, all that happened at the beginning. He was transferred to Joliet Treatment Center, which is supposed to provide the highest level of mental health care in the state. But in fact, he got very little mental health care while he was there. As is all too typical these days, he got appointments with a psychiatrist regularly who prescribed medication, but basically no group therapy. He'd got no group therapy and no real one-on-one therapy. He just cycled between being in isolation for health reasons and being in isolation for disciplinary reasons and being in isolation for crisis care. And in all of those situations, he was not allowed to go to group therapy. He got these sort of check-ins that they do regularly to make sure he was still alive. There would be 5 minutes at cell front, and that was the so-called mental health care he was getting. And that was it. So eventually he did set his cell on fire. At that point, things got much, much worse for him. The guards fairly quickly got a fire extinguisher and extinguished the fire, although it did take them a good probably 5 minutes to recognize that, in fact, there was a fire there. Nobody was really paying attention to it. We learned now that the fire alarm system was not functioning. And therefore no fire alarms went off at all. You had to wait for a guard to actually notice that there was smoke in the hallway. They then grabbed a fire extinguisher, went down and put out the flames, and then ordered him to come to his cell front and cuff up. At this point, we now know he was collapsed and unconscious in the back of his cell. So of course he didn't come to cuff up. So the Department of Corrections, in its infinite wisdom, decided the right thing to do was then pepper spray him. So they pepper sprayed him because he was non-compliant. Meanwhile, they take other people on the same hallway out, because the whole hallway is filled with smoke, but don't open his door at all. They don't do anything for him. They finally call the local fire department, say on the 911 call, the immediate thing the dispatcher asks is everybody out of their cells? And they say, well, we're taking care of that. You don't have to worry about that. And the fire is out, so all we need your help with is getting the smoke out of the unit. So that's what the fire department thinks they're responding to. They come in, they start setting up big fans to blow the smoke out. And finally, both a prisoner and one of the guards casually, and one of the prisoners is yelling, hey, there's a guy still in the cell back there. You got to get him out. At which point the fire department sort of freaks out because nobody's told them. They've been here for like 5 minutes and nobody said there's something in the cell. They go down and finally get the Department of Corrections to open that cell up, pull him out. He's unconscious at this point, or semi-conscious at this point. Has a charred airway. His clothes have a lot of ash on them. They take him to an ambulance, start doing helping him breathe, forcing oxygen in his lungs through the whatever little things they have in the ambulance. Ambulance goes to the sally port, at which point they don't open the sally port for the ambulance. They sit there for another half of an hour while they find the right paperwork to release this guy to go to the hospital, while they run up a chase car, while they find an extra guard to sit inside the ambulance with him at the gurney. This is all for somebody who's unconscious, and the ambulance driver almost gets into a fight with the guard there, I mean, a physical fight, saying, hey, this guy is dying while you guys mess around getting paperwork. He didn't use mess around, he used swear words. And a whole bunch of guards had to come out and separate these guys. They kept calling into the dispatch saying, I'm still sitting here. Every like 2 minutes, they'd call dispatch, who wants to know where the heck this ambulance is. And they keep calling dispatch saying, we're still stuck back here. Half an hour later, they finally get to the hospital. He survives another week, and then he passes away. So the family fairly quickly comes to Kaplan and Grady, and we start investigating. So that's kind of how these things often happen. It's not usually just one thing that happens. It's a whole series of things that may go back several months or several years that lead to a death in prison. Sometimes, of course, it's much quicker. From our point of view, no one should ever die in prison, ever. I think of this as being sort of 4 basic ways that people die in prison. There's illnesses. If you're that sick, you should be allowed out. That's what we have the Joe Coleman Act for. Violence, either by guards or by other prisoners. That just shouldn't happen at all. Occasionally there's an accident. There was a case where somebody got run over by a tractor that was working in the facility or something like that. Those obviously should not happen. And then the final one is self-harm. But none of those should actually happen in a prison. Now, just to be clear, just because something goes wrong in prison doesn't necessarily mean there's a lawsuit you can bring. So I'm not saying that every death in prison leads to a lawsuit. The courts have made it very difficult to sue, so there's a fairly narrow group of those cases that you can bring as a lawsuit. But nonetheless, I would say if the first thing you should do when someone dies in prison is contact a lawyer. They can be very helpful guiding you through the FOIA process. They can be very helpful getting you the property of your loved ones. They can be very helpful in getting his medical records if that's necessary. And most importantly, the lawyer or you yourself should be writing a letter to the prison saying, preserve all the evidence, preserve the video, preserve the incident reports, make sure the videos don't get released of the area around the cell or wherever it is where he passed away. All that stuff needs to be preserved. In theory, the Department of Corrections keeps videos, but only for 30 to 60 days. Thus, all too often, by the time we as lawyers get a case, the evidence is gone. They've erased it. Now, there should be a policy saying they should keep those for forever, frankly. If a prisoner dies, the videos related to that death, they should, I don't know why they would ever destroy it. They should just keep it in a secure location so that if any incident comes up, anybody sues, they have a way to do it. But that's not what the department always does these days. So that's what ought to happen. There's several different sorts of documents and information that I think family members or loved ones should be able to get, which doesn't mean you always can, but just in terms of you should be able to get. The death certificate, that you should always be able to get. That's a public record. In the death certificate should be the name of the doctor who performed the autopsy. The autopsy is part of his medical records, and therefore anybody who can get the medical records should be able to get that. And that should include somebody who has who's listed as next of kin. But if not, any family member should be able to fill out a small affidavit form, a small state affidavit, and that would be sufficient to get you the medical records. Small state affidavits are a form that's on the Secretary of State's website. You can fill it out. It's a very simple form. You don't need a lawyer for this. It just basically says this man had nothing except prison property. He didn't have any real estate. He didn't have anything like that. Here are the heirs, which is generally going to be a wife and kids. If there's no kids, then parents. And that's all there is. So we don't need to go through formal probate proceedings. That should be enough to get you medical records. In terms of his property, which I know a lot of people very much want, is the prisoner's property, because often it includes like letters that were sent to him. It may include photographs, family photographs that he had. So those kinds of things are very important. Usually, those will be released to whoever the prisoner listed as next of kin on their prison form. Now, not always. Sometimes you need the small state affidavit to get those. But generally, the Department of Corrections has been releasing that information to whoever it is that the prisoner listed on their next of kin form. Medical records from inside the prison, you should also be able to get with a small state affidavit. That person then has the right to the prisoner's medical records. That can be very important if it's something like an illness, or even if it's bad treatment of something that happened. Inside the prison, medical records can be a crucial piece of what you need to get to figure out what went wrong so that this person died. The final thing that is really useful to have is any sort of investigation the department did. On a simple level, that's simply incident reports. Generally these days, and I'm not saying this is perfect at all, so Julie was absolutely right to say that they often just ignore FOIA requests. But generally, if you have a small state affidavit and you file a FOIA request for the incident reports, they should give it to you. If not, that's something you can take to court and force them to give it to you. We've had this too occasionally over getting all the incident reports. Same with videotapes. If there's a video of what happened, that's something you ought to be able to get through FOIA. There's a big battle about that often. The Department of Corrections hates to release videos, but there's now been several cases that have been brought where those videos have in fact been produced. So I think that they're beginning to loosen them up. If you saw the Marshall Project stuff, they did have videos that were released from the prison, some by FOIAs and some, well, all by FOIAs, some to us and some directly to the reporter. But all those videos that you saw on the Marshall Project all did come through FOIAs. So they can be gotten. They used to give us investigative reports. So not just the incident reports, but in most death cases, the department will do its own internal investigation to see what went wrong. And that's a much longer document where they interview all kinds of people who were involved. Generally, these days, they are not releasing those absent a lawsuit. Of course, once a lawsuit is filed, you can get all kinds of stuff. But those are the kinds of documents that you can and should ask for. Before you even start a fight about it, I would send a letter directly to the Department of Corrections, the warden where he died, saying, preserve all the evidence. We may want to do something about this. We may want to sue about this. Therefore, we are asking that you preserve all evidence that you have related to this individual's death. That's just crucial because then later on, if this evidence disappears, they can't say, well, we didn't know anybody wanted it. And we just routinely dispose of it as we would dispose of anything. Once you send that letter, it puts an obligation on them, a legal obligation on them to hang on to that evidence, at least until the statute of limitations is run, which in Illinois is 2 years. So that's the sort of basic outline of what I think people who have a loved one inside should try to collect that information. Once you have that information, you can begin to figure out exactly what went wrong. And we as lawyers can figure out whether or not it fits in one of those boxes that allows us to sue somebody for the wrongful death that happened inside. But that's my short spiel. I'm sure people have questions, and I could say a lot more about all of this stuff. Anybody, I don't know if, I think I can use the chat too. I'm happy to put the link to the project.
You know, Alan, I have a burning question
Go
because
for
it
it.
directly affected me, and I want to know this for all family members and loved ones. I was listed as Michael's next of kin, and the prison called me when he passed away, and they sent his body immediately to a coroner. And this coroner asked me, I said, you know, I'm listed as his next of kin, but he has siblings, and I don't have any way to get a hold of them. And I know he has siblings who just ignored him, but I also know if I call the facility, they're not going to share that. And they, even though they hadn't contacted him in years and years, they deserve to know that their brother had passed away.
Sure.
His parents, he had lost some years ago. And the coroner said, well, you're not the next kin then. Even though I was listed as the next of kin.
Right.
And I went all the way to the top of DOC, to the director's staff about this next of kin thing. And they said, no, that's not it. And so I'm wondering about this form and how legal it is, or if I know a lot of people inside do that, list someone else as next of kin and not necessarily a blood relative.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of his wishes was not to be left there in the prison, was to be taken out somewhere, right?
Sure.
So I don't know if that got done because his family, I don't know what they did.
Yeah, so next of kin only controls what the Department of Corrections does. It
Okay.
does not substitute for a will.
Okay.
So, you know, if there's somebody inside who you're dealing with, I know it's a difficult conversation to have, but I just had one at Menard with somebody. It's worth filling out it can be a simple will because you don't really have anything to give them. You can pull these forms off of the internet and that'll be fine. But you have to designate somebody through a formal will to be your heir. It can't just be that you fill out the form in the prison saying next of kin. That really just has to do with who they're notifying. It really doesn't do anything beyond that, other than say, this is the person I want you to tell when I die. It doesn't have any legal effect outside of the prison at all, so it doesn't control what the coroner does, it doesn't control what a funeral home does, and it certainly doesn't give you any right to act as if you were his family. So I think prisoners don't understand that. In general, I think if they list that, then that means you're in charge after they die, and you can do whatever, but it doesn't mean that. It's not a substitute for a will. So if you're dealing with somebody, you know, obviously it's difficult to say, hey, you may die in here, you should fill out a will. But stuff happens to anybody at whatever age. Anything can happen to anybody. So I think it's a good idea for everybody who has a loved one inside who they're not directly a relative of, to suggest that prisoner ought to fill out a will. It'll make your life so much simpler should something untoward happen. It just then that gives you the legal right to act on their behalf, basically, once they pass away.
And do you have to have that will notarized or anything?
It has to be witnessed by 2 people. But that
Okay.
can be, you know, you and a friend who comes and visit with them. It could be a counselor who does it. If you're not there, then the counselors can do it.
Okay.
It just has to be 2 people witnessing it. Does not have to be notarized.
And I'm going to share this with people because, like I said, I refer to him as my bonus son, but I know there's many people inside who have significant others
Right.
who, for all their purposes, feel married. I mean,
But if they're not legally married, that does not
Right.
matter in Illinois.
okay.
Illinois, and to be clear, Illinois does not have common law marriage. So it doesn't matter how long you've been together.
Okay. I think that's very important. Um, I would open this if anyone else has a question. That was really bothering me. I mean, I realized it and with the coroner, and I obviously wasn't going to, but yeah, I don't even know that his family went and got his property because they felt like he had nothing, but it was upsetting.
Yeah,
And I
I
wouldn't want
understand.
anyone to have to do that. And you couldn't even like, even if you did suspect many things, um, you couldn't even pursue it if you're just listed as next of kin because
That's right. Yeah, it
yeah.
really has to be somebody who has the right to inherit,
Okay.
has the right to pursue it. And somebody, Jackie asked in the chat, what if there's no next of kin listed? Then that just means nobody's going to get notified. Um,
Oh,
or, I mean, maybe unless it shows up somewhere else in there. Obviously, somebody like a cellmate may know who your loved one is on the outside, and they may be notifying them or something. But in terms of the Department of Corrections, they're not going to search and try to figure out who they should be notifying. If you don't write it down, then they're not going to do it.
yeah.
If they've died or they're unavailable, again, they're not going to. It's really a notice question. Um, Anybody, it doesn't matter or not if they listed as next of kin in terms of the legal stuff. As long as they can fill out, as long as they are in fact next of kin and can fill out the small estate affidavit, then they are the heirs and can act on behalf of the estate, and get the medical records and get whatever information they're willing to cough up under FOIA, get his property, all those kinds of things. So that's what's done. If you're married, if you're legally married, it's the next question here. Sorry. If you're legally married, then you are the next of kin unless he's got kids. If he has kids, then the kids get precedent over the wife. But without kids, then the wife is the next of kin, and therefore, assuming it's a legal marriage rather than some sort of common
Prison
law
marriage.
marriage, then you are fine. You don't need a will. I
That's a
mean,
good
the only
point too.
advantage of having a will in that situation is it means that anybody else who comes out of the woodwork and say, yes, I'm in fact this guy's kid, you don't have a fight about it because it doesn't matter. If there's a will, then you're it. Anybody, prisoner or not, has the right to write their kids out of their will. They don't have to leave their kids any money. So that's the only advantage that prevents somebody from coming in from the outside and saying, "Hey, I really am this person's kid, long lost from 20 years ago. He didn't know existed, but in fact I do." And then you have to go through a whole DNA test. They have a big fight about it, and that's a pain in the neck.
I would caution this for mothers and maybe siblings if in fact your loved one is estranged from his legal wife, you will not be notified. And I know that a mom that happened to, they were not divorced, but not together.
Right.
And um, the wife was the one who made some decisions and not maybe the mom or whoever else it might be. So,
He was involved in a case like that too, where there was a brother and sister who were very close to the prisoner and visited them regularly and provided support and et cetera, et cetera. Um, and there was a wife that they had separated long and long ago, and he had never seen his kids because his wife wouldn't let them visit. But they never got formally divorced, and therefore, when he died, she's the one who had all the rights, which was unfair, but legal.
yeah, that can be really important.
Yeah, I mean, those legalities, everybody ignores as long as he's alive. But then when somebody passes away, all of a sudden, and there's a possibility of some money out there, then all of a sudden the law kicks in and you weren't formally divorced. So sorry, it's just as if you were still married.
Yeah, that's definitely. Oh, okay. We got a lot of questions here.
Okay, so the next one I see here is, does the IDOC control disposition of the body? No. Body goes to the county coroner. Sometimes I should mention it, sometimes it's a little tricky to figure out who the county coroner is. because they don't necessarily go to the county in which the prison is located. So, for example, if somebody goes out, somebody gets seriously ill in prison or injured in prison and goes to an outside hospital, they may not die until they're in the hospital, and the hospital may be located in a different county. At which point that will be the place of death, and that's where the coroner would hold the inquest or do the autopsy and do the death certificate from, not the county in which the prison is located. This was a big deal at TAMS when the Supermax was open, because there was essentially no hospital in Alexander County. So people went to 2 or 3 different surrounding counties, 2 hospitals, depending on exactly what was wrong with them. So often family members had to call around to several different hospitals before they could figure out, or several different coroners to figure out which county it was he actually died in, which of course was a real pain in the neck. And of course, the Department of Corrections, as usual, was not all that cooperative.
Yeah, that would be difficult because they don't give you the coroner information, and if they were, and they won't give you hospital information. Like if someone's brought to the hospital, you don't necessarily know which hospital they're at all. So
No, and they won't tell you, right? Generally, they will not tell you unless somebody is really nice. But generally, they say it's a security reason that because hospitals obviously don't have the same sort of security as prisons do, then they're afraid somebody's going to smuggle something in or arrange an escape or whatever it may be, and therefore they don't want to tell people where the incarcerated person is hospitalized. And generally, they're not on the name of, they're not registered under that name in the hospital. So even if you call around all the hospitals and say, is such and such a person here, they'll say no, because they're not publicly listed on the sort of directory.
I didn't think I knew that.
Yeah, again, for security reasons.
Yeah, because they're moving El Chapo or whatever around.
Yeah, I mean, I found this out in a hard way in that a prisoner I was representing had a serious suicide attempt and was on life support, and her family was there because they did let the family know. It wasn't IDOC, she was in a jail. The jail did know let the family know where she was, so the family was all there, and the family called me and said, "Hey, I want you to come meet with us at the hospital." And I came to the hospital and said, "What room is she in?" And they're like, "She's not here." And I'm like, "I know she's here because I'm talking to their family on the phone, and they say they're in the room with her." So finally, the family just had to come down and get me in the lobby because they denied that she was there. And I later learned that was the policy. At least many hospitals have that policy. They will not list somebody who's in prison for exactly that security reason.
Yeah. I think Sheila has a great question.
Where's the released? I mean, yeah. I mean, it's released. Well, released to who is the question. So the typical thing would be the body is released to the coroner. The coroner arranges with, other than Cook County, a coroner arranges for a doctor to do the autopsy. The autopsy then goes back to the coroner. The coroner fills out a death certificate. It's then released to a local funeral home. The funeral home arranges for the burial. That's the typical way this happens. Now, I have seen occasions where a family member has been able to say, don't do an autopsy, and in fact, we're arranging for an independent autopsy and have the body sent somewhere else other than to the local place. But that is rare and probably is going to take a court order, because generally the law is that every coroner is supposed to do an autopsy for anybody who's incarcerated in the state of Illinois, or at the time that they die anywhere in the state. So I've only seen that done outside of Illinois, so I don't know if the laws are different there, or if the family had enough clout, or why it happened. But at least occasionally people have been able to drag somebody out of that system. I'm not sure that's even a good idea. Generally, you want to have that autopsy that the state is doing.
I see Brian said he had a few questions, so we're just
As a
going to let him
journalist,
answer
okay?
them. I
Go
know,
ahead,
I
Brian.
love it.
Hey, folks. Thanks so much, Alan. It's great to see you. Thanks for all the invaluable information as always. And thanks for hosting Restore Justice. So as a journalist, I've tried to get my hands on documents after somebody passed, and I rarely have any luck. And if the answer is there's no luck, I get it. So like at the county jail, I'm trying to get a coroner's report for somebody who died in June. how long does it take to, in the process of doing an autopsy and getting a coroner's report, how long does that take?
It's going to vary a lot by county. The typical slow part of that is getting a toxicology report back. The autopsy itself generally happens within a week or so. You want to do it obviously before decomposition starts, and you need to do it before they're embalmed, otherwise it's meaningless. So the actual autopsy is pretty quick. It can take up to 6 months to get the toxicology report back, and then of course the coroner has to get to looking at the toxicology report and write up their whole autopsy, including the toxicology report. So it should not take 6 months, but I have seen them easily take 6 months.
And that is a public document.
The death certificate, is my understanding, is a public document, not the autopsy itself.
Okay, so but I should be able to get my hands on the death certificate.
That's my understanding, yes. Now, I will also say, part of the reason that Shannon Heffernan was able to get as much information as she was is because WBEZ regularly sues the Department of Corrections to enforce those FOIAs. And I think they've given up on a lot of it and just say, okay, you're going to sue us anyway, so we'll give it to you.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if that's going to make things easier for other journalists because they've sort of set the precedent now. You can say, hey, you gave this to the WBEZ, why can't you give it to me? I'm a journalist too. Or it's going to make it harder saying you got to hire your own lawyer. I'm
Yeah.
hoping that it sets a precedent that makes it easier for journalists all over the state to get these death certificates, and get videos and get incident reports. But I'm not going to guarantee the Department of Corrections plays that way.
Yeah, gotcha. And other times I've tried to request things and they throw up HIPAA concerns. Like somebody at the jail was taken to the hospital. I tried to get how many people have been, and there's been stories coming out of like immigration detention centers or jails. How many times are people taken to the local hospital and they threw up a HIPAA?
I mean, HIPAA is always going to be an issue. That's why you have to be. That's why you have to have. That's not going to be something you can get through FOIA, or just a request. That has to be from somebody who's in error. That's why the small state affidavit is crucial. They're not just going to give it to a journalist, and they should. HIPAA says they should not give it to them. That is protected health information. I don't think any of us would want a journalist to be able to walk into our doctor's offices and get our medical records. So yeah, that is absolutely right. If you have a release from somebody who is a family member, then you should be able to get it. There's no reason, or maybe the family member has to get it individually. You as a journalist can't actually represent the family member, unlike lawyers. But if the family member submits the HIPAA form along with a small state affidavit, they're entitled to that document, no question about it.
I've heard some of my journalist friends do that. And then
let me just say there's one other exception here, which is if there's an active law enforcement investigation going on, then they can hold on to this stuff as long as that investigation is active. So that can slow things down a lot more. And there's not like a time limit on how long they have to investigate these things. So we're dealing with some cases right now where the coroner is refusing to release the autopsy on the grounds that there's a pending investigation of this death.
Okay, and then so my last question is, and I just talked
Never
to
say it's your last question,
last question
because there may be another one.
Okay. And I just talked to somebody in Michigan. There's been a bunch of women at the Huron Valley, 5 women who have passed since May in Michigan. But I just talking to my friends at Logan, they said that there were 2 women who passed in May, June. So should I file a request for a death certificate?
You would.
Okay. That's the next step.
You should also ask the prison. I mean, you should also be able to get from the prison. I would also ask from the prison at least numbers of people who died. They may not be able to release the name, but there's no reason they shouldn't release the information as to how many and of what cause.
So I file a FOIA with just the IDOC or call?
I would file a FOIA with the IDOC and agree right in your FOIA that you don't want the names of them. You just want the data regarding deaths and ask it for the whole last 6 months. I mean, that's how the Illinois Death in Prisons Project got all their information, is through FOIAs, saying we don't want the names, we just want the information.
Okay. Thanks so much, Alan.
Sure. There's a very long one here.
It's Lori, and I'm wondering if she can, if you're able to because she lost her son, so he was young, and I don't know when it
Let me take a
was.
look at it for a minute here.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, they don't necessarily have to take somebody to a hospital. If the doctor at the prison declares the death, then there's no reason to take them to a hospital, but there still needs to be an autopsy. There needs to be an autopsy for everybody who dies in custody in Illinois. That's state law. Um, and the rest of it is terrible, but given what I described at the beginning here in terms of a chase car and transport and all that, yeah, I don't know why he was listed as being on medical furlough. That makes no sense at all, except that they often use that as sort of a holder until they have an official declaration of death. But if they don't have an official declaration of death, then you should have gone to the hospital. So, I'm not sure that those two things don't really match up. So I'm not sure what was going on there. Was this within the last 2 years, or that the reason is 2 years is because that's how long you have to bring a lawsuit?
Lori, can you answer? Or how
You're
long
muted
ago it
if you're
was?
trying to.
There
Oh,
she is.
okay, here I am. It was May of 2023
Oh,
you passed.
Sorry.
yeah,
And
Thanks.
it's the kind of case we would love to look into, and try to help you get those documents, as an investigation in order to figure out whether or not there is in fact a lawsuit there, either for bad medical care or, for not treating him once they've found something. I mean, this whole delay in getting people out to the hospital is something that is, I think, um, both tragic, but somehow doesn't surprise me.
Well, it said on his death certificate it was fentanyl toxicity, but the thing was they weren't able to even determine how he got it in his system. And you know, Clint wasn't a drug user in there. He had two little boys, 9 and 6, and
Yeah.
that was not his norm. So we just,
Yeah, I mean, at some point, somebody has to bring a case about how all these drugs are getting into the prison and how the Department of Corrections is not responding,
yeah,
to them. I mean, I know that there have been 3 deaths at Picnickville from drug overdoses just this year.
wow.
So, this is a growing problem, and, the bottom line is, oddly enough, despite the fact that everybody recognizes that there is currently a drug problem in the Department of Corrections, I think only 1 or 2 of the prisons actually even offer drug treatment programs. So if they are serious about getting rid of the drugs in prisons, then they would offer drug treatment programs, because clearly it's
Yeah.
way more efficient to cut down on the demand than it is to try to interdict the supplies.
Yeah.
Instead, what they've done is to eliminate physical mail, which of course makes you even more depressed and more likely to turn to drugs, and does nothing at all. At least everybody I've talked to said it had no impact whatsoever on the availability of drugs inside the prison. So, at some point, I think somebody ought to sue about the whole DOC's response to drugs. Um, Sorry that it's kind of late for your child, however.
I'm really sad about that, Lori. Um, I do have a question
Thanks.
about someone passes away, they go to the coroner, they do the autopsy. Um, and what if the family doesn't come to claim that person? What do they do with them?
Every county, I believe, every county anyway, is like Cook County and has a so-called pauper's grave, where they dispose of anybody who doesn't have anybody come pick them up.
No, it
So
was
they don't,
2024 when Clint passed, not 2023. Sorry to interject there.
I'm sorry, when in 2024?
2024, May of 2024.
May of 20, okay, but
Yeah,
again, still
he
more
sorry.
than
got
2
there
years.
over the 2 years. Shoot.
Yeah.
It is, it's too late to do anything?
2 years is the statute of limitations, so really, we would need a case 6 months before the statute of limitations in order to have time to investigate.
Jeez.
So, sorry.
Lori, it's too late for you, but I'm glad you brought that up because, see, this is important that people know this. because sometimes you
Really
can't
have to move
react right
quickly.
away. And
You
this
really
is
have
a,
to move quickly in these cases. I
yeah.
know that it's a very stressful time, and the last thing you're thinking about is, trying to figure out what the legalities are here. But if anybody thinks there's anything going wrong, it's really helpful to reach out to a lawyer as soon as possible after
Well,
the
we
person
did.
arrives.
That was the thing. We did at the very head end, and several lawyers that we talked to said, "Oh, we didn't have a case." Now, how could you not have a case when they didn't keep him safe, and they let him die?
Well, as I say, not every wrongful death in prison can be a lawsuit. Again, the courts have made it very difficult to bring these cases, and it's only a very narrow set of situations. Just not keeping someone safe is not sufficient for a lawsuit. You have to show that some individual, um, to simplify, was deliberately indifferent. That is, they knew that there was a danger, there was something they reasonably could have done about it, and they decided not to do it. But some individual, not the Department of Corrections as a whole. The Supreme Court has said you can't sue the Department of Corrections or the state, or even like the warden because they're in charge. You have to find an individual person who did something wrong. And that person has to have both knowledge of the problem, knowledge of what they can do about it, and consciously decide not to do it. So it's a very high standard.
Well, there was a gentleman who went to Clint's door right before they had found him deceased, and they did question him, but and this other attorney said, well, you could possibly sue him for, drug-induced murder, but then the ball has been dropped with me so many times that I don't know which direction to go next,
I understand. I'm not saying any of this is easy, and it is not. There's no question about it. And unfortunately, we turn down a lot of cases just because we can't put together the right information for a particular individual.
Mhm.
I just think this is important. And if nothing else, Clint's passing will maybe the information will help someone else somewhere down the line. Sometimes I just have to look at things like that because this
Yeah.
stuff is so terrible and painful.
Yes.
You just try to think, okay, what little bit of ray of good might come out of this? I'm still wondering about this, what they do with the body, Alan. So I know it's kind of a little morbid, but um, so they don't put him back on prison grounds because I know Stateville has a cemetery like kind of
Several of the prisons
attached to
used,
it.
several of the prisons used to have cemeteries. As far as I know, and I could be wrong on this, they don't use those anymore.
Oh,
Um,
good.
I know like Menard has a big cemetery behind the sort of halfway down the hill from the minimum to the maximum security units, which was used for many, many years. I don't think they use any of those in-house cemeteries anymore. I think they leave that to they want to get rid of these bodies as quickly as possible. They send it off to the coroner and it then becomes the county's problem, not the prison's problem.
God, I don't care.
No,
Well, I don't know if it's
I'm
not
just,
care. I
yeah.
mean, I don't know that prisoners would prefer to be buried on the prison grounds.
Right. Yeah, I don't think they would want that
No.
at all. I just wondered they don't cremate him or anything then they just bury him somewhere
That's my understanding is that it's been a while. I have not dealt with a prisoner like that. I mean, this comes up a lot more with homeless people in Chicago,
yeah.
where people die and there's no family members that they can identify. They hold them, I think Chicago holds them for 6 months. And if nobody comes to claim the body within that period of time, then they're put into a pauper's grave.
Okay, well that's kind of sad too, but
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very sad.
does anybody else have any questions or anything? We've got a little bit of time left.
I know it's
I can
not a
let you
fun
go
topic to
and
talk about.
it is hard and there's a lot
And I
this
wish I had a like magic wand saying if you wave the wand the right way and say the right spells, then you'll find out everything that happened, but that just isn't the way this works.
Yeah.
This is Sheila. I have a question.
Go for it.
So I am friends with a gentleman at Danville, and no relation, relative or anything like that at all. And I'm just not sure what he has done. Back in COVID, he wrote me and said, "Hey, if I die, I want you to take possession of my body and bury me. I don't want to be buried on prison grounds." And I said, well, do what you have to do on your end. I don't know anything about how that works. And so I think something's in place. I don't know. I'm realizing in listening to this conversation, we need to refresh that conversation and see what the status. Yeah.
I would just, I mean, I would, if I would go onto the internet, find a form will, send it to them and say, fill this out and list whoever you want to, if you want me to be this, then fill that person out, me out. If you want somebody else to be the one who makes those decisions, fill that person out, because without that, I'm gonna have a huge fight and may well not be able to have any control whatsoever.
Yeah.
Your letter to me doesn't give me any legal rights at all.
Exactly. And so then, that's why I was asking specifically about the body, because I mean, he's in Danville. I'm, several hours away, and
Sure.
and I just don't know what that process is. I'm sure I don't back my minivan up to the prison and get the body,
No, you're not.
I just don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to the local coroner, and then the local coroner will give it to the local funeral home, and from there you can make whatever arrangements you want.
Okay. Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Typically, if you were in Chicago, for example, and the person died in Danville, it would go to the Danville coroner, and then it would go to a Danville funeral home, and you would contact a funeral home in Chicago, and they would arrange with the funeral home in Danville to come and get the body and bring it up here and for whatever kind of burial or cremation or whatever you wanted to do up here in Cook County.
But as far as the body being embalmed or anything, none of that's going to happen until it gets to whatever funeral home or.
Oh,
right?
no, not right. It won't happen until the funeral home. Coroners don't do that.
I'm sorry. I find this amazing that IDOC can get a body processed long enough that it's in any kind of a state to. They don't do anything fast, for heaven's sake.
Wow.
Well, they like to get rid of dead bodies.
They do that pretty fast.
Do they?
The other interesting thing here and this is kind of off the topic here, but the other thing I've discovered is, and this does not apply to the IDOC, but for jails, what often happens if somebody is terminally ill and hospitalized, they will dismiss the pending criminal charges against them. And then, of course, they're discharged from the jail, so they're no longer a prisoner at all. And then there's nothing that the state or the county has to do with it at all. Then it's just as if they were found homeless on the street and in the hospital.
That's like a paperwork reduction act, isn't it?
No, it's really saving them money because they're not responsible for the hospitalization costs either.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
That's horrible.
It's really horrible. But yeah, that's what happened to this person who was in a coma. The state then dismissed all the charges against her, and the jail discharged her as no longer having any pending charges. And it was all just to avoid the county being responsible for her fairly substantial medical bills because she was alive for like a month in intensive care.
Wow.
So after like 2 days, they just discharged her from the jail.
Wow. I didn't know. Well, I should know they could get away with that. But so it is very important, Sheila, that if your friend wants you to be that person or whoever they want to be, next of kin, but then the other thing is this will. And then I guess you would have to go visit, or he would have to have two people witness the signature and send it to you or something. And
I mean, that's a question that Christine asked in the chat is what happens to that will? The main thing is you hang on to it because then you have a copy. But you can certainly send a copy to the warden at the prison so that it's in his file, and therefore they're on notice that this happens. So
that's a good thought. And be sure and have it follow around, because.
But most importantly, you keep it somewhere safe so you have a copy. If you get notified that his death has happened, then you have an opportunity to start the legal process to actually have that will certified, and then you are the one who's in charge.
Yeah, and when the DOC wins like that, you definitely want your loved ones or the person you care about's wishes to be honored in whatever way that looks. So
right, and unfortunately, paperwork rules at that point. Well, his heartfelt desires don't matter so much as the paperwork do.
Yeah, and I think there's many people inside who think that next of kin is the answer to
everything.
Everything.
Right.
So that's good to know. Well, with that, I just think we just did so good sadly, good on a hard subject, really. And I wish I would have known some of this prior. Also, I don't know, just real quick, this is on medical things off the subject, but we have a few minutes.
They're
And
related.
Alan, um, because I think you said that if they don't have some type of thing filled out, that the warden is the
Yeah.
person who
So
makes the decision if
let's give
they're
a
on
little
their
background here.
deathbed.
So we're talking about here what happens if the prisoner becomes incompetent so they can no longer make decisions for themselves medically. Under the law, the warden is the designated person to make those decisions for the prisoner. If the prisoner has filled out a power of attorney for health care, which they should, then you have a little bit of a fight with the warden. Um, and generally, those fights are won by the person on the outside over some great resistance. You know, the Department of Corrections wants to, and to be clear, that doesn't give you. Okay, so that's the question they put it. Jackie wrote the good question. Does the DOC have to honor the power of attorney for healthcare? It depends. What the power of attorney for healthcare essentially does is give you whatever rights the prisoner would have. So if you're asking for something the prisoner doesn't have a right to ask for, then no, they don't have to honor it at all. Um, and remember, the power of attorney for healthcare only comes into effect when the prisoner is unable to make decisions for themselves. So it doesn't mean that they have to release information from you, anything to you, or anything like that. It only means that when the prisoner, generally this is when they go into a coma, but it could also be mental health deterioration to the point where they can't make decisions for themselves. Then they're supposed to honor your requests as to what happens with healthcare, but only to the extent that they would honor his requests as to what happens with healthcare. So you have no more power than the prisoner did. So just because the prisoner thought he should get an MRI, if the prison thinks he should get an X-ray, then the fact that you think he should have an MRI doesn't mean anything more than the prisoner thinking so. So ultimately, the Department of Corrections still basically controls medical care unless there's really an issue that the prisoner would get to decide on, like ending life support. That I think is the most important thing where the power of attorney for healthcare does come into effect, is ending or continuing life support.
That's what I was talking about. I would not want a warden to make that decision for someone I cared about. I mean, and it may be the same decision you would make or not. It doesn't matter. You should have that right. And I just think that's really important that everyone knows that. I saw something else here.
Is the IDOC obligated to contact you if you're the power of attorney, if and when the prisoner should go into a
Question.
coma? I would say, good question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that one.
We're gonna, yeah. And I sad to say, I think it would almost come down to facility by facility because they're all so independent of each
I would
other.
say they should.
I
It's
hate
whether or
to
not
say
there's a
that.
legal obligation or not, I don't know.
All right, well, that was a sad one. Um, okay, well, I just want to thank everyone for coming. We got a couple more slides we're gonna bore you with. Can you
Sorry,
edit that?
this is not a cheerier subject to talk
No,
about.
no. But I think it's important. Oh, is that if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. That's my email, pretty easy, J Anderson, and it's at restorejustice.org. And even if you haven't for Alan, I know his email, so I can reach out to him.
Yep.
And here's how you can stay in touch with us. These are like our
Geez, you have a
little.
lot of choices now.
I know. I really don't because I'm kind of limited in what I have or what I participate in, but hopefully other people were. Thank you very much again for taking your time out. And if you talk to people, um, moms and sisters and just people who care, let them know a couple of these things. We have some really good takeaways, and I just wish we would have known that ahead of time. Even if there's not foul play or anything, which I mean, and you can't even look into it if you're not that person on the well. If
And
you're
just to
just
be clear, it's
listening.
not necessarily foul play. It can be
Yeah.
a medical condition which was not treated properly for, it could be years. Something that's growing slowly. Um,
Yeah.
so, you know, it doesn't have to be foul play in that sense. Um, and again, if a loved one of yours dies inside prison, reach out to us or to any other lawyer who does this work. And right away. Don't delay.
Jackie, thank you. I love that. She has 100 more questions. Alan, when we're going to look about, I don't know, people testifying, I don't know if there really is. We had talked about with our subject matter or people are
Yeah,
really
I think
interested
that
in it.
our goal is to have this fall a subject matter hearing on medical care. Now that may change a little bit because mental health care is now bumped to the top of everybody's agenda because the Marshall Project report got so much play here. You got a bunch of legislators who are now calling for something to be done. So I'm not sure that if that's going to bump our medical care side and focus on the mental health care instead, but we'll get back to medical care one way or another. And definitely if that happens, we'll notify you and everybody else.
Yeah, we'll be looking for people. I will say, great that they are reacting, but it would be nice if at one time or another that people decided to be a little bit proactive about what happens in the DOC
Yeah,
before people set themselves on fire or die or whatever. It's a little bit frustrating.
yeah,
So,
it is. But at least that means the death is not for nothing.
yeah, exactly.
It's
Well,
better. What's that old saying? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today.
yeah. Thank you for that. That's perfect. I need to remember that sometimes. Again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Alan, for sharing this.
I'm always happy to help out restore justice. You all do great work, and I'm happy to support you any way I can.
Okay, bye everyone.